If the Chicago Bears can build on the progress they made against the Denver Broncos last week, they have a real chance to beat a Washington Commanders team that has some real flaws. But at this point, the Bears still have to earn that faith that they will make those improvements.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group, and be sure to hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we can take advantage of our wonderful hosts of other shows here on the network. And so today it's Crossover Thursday, and we're going to talk to David Harrison from Locked On Commanders to preview this game and get into the biggest storylines around each team, the biggest matchups, the X factors, and what it will take for the Chicago Bears to get their first victory of the season on Thursday Night Football. A lot to get into with David, so I'll kick it over to him, and let's get started.
Today's Crossover Thursday episode brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. And on this crossover episode, we're going to discuss what the Chicago Bears and the Washington Commanders both have to do to come out of FedEx Field with a win on Thursday night. And we're going to discuss some key matchups and players for week 5 along the way. But first, we're going to start with the biggest things happening around each team. So, Lauren, what is going on around the Chicago Bears these days?
What isn't going around with the Chicago Bears these days? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like pick your scandal, pick your controversy, pick your story. The big one this week, though, has been the Chase Claypool situation, and we don't need to get too deep into it because he's not going to play in this game. And the story is that he's not going to play in this game. Like that's kind of the whole thing, that he has been asked to stay away from the team and is largely, I mean, the Bears aren't saying specifically what happened, but you read between the lines. You know, he was made a healthy scratch on Sunday. They felt like his effort hasn't been where they want it to be. Matt Eberflus kind of hinted that there have been maybe issues in terms of meetings and attitude and participation. And he also spoke out against the coaching staff last week on Friday and kind of expressed that he didn't feel like he was being used properly here. The Bears claim it wasn't retaliation for those quotes, but obviously wish he hadn't said it. But now we're to the point where he's either going to be cut or traded, and there's not really any path to him returning to this team, barring some sort of miracle, come to Jesus moment where everybody gets together and sings Kumbaya. So Chase Claypool's out. It's a matter of whether another team will give the Bears a 7th round pick to go get him, or whether they'll just have to cut him outright at the trade deadline.
Yeah, I wonder if you can give a conditional 7th round pick that is like, it's a 7th rounder if he's on our roster for 4 games or more, but if he's not, you get nothing. Like you just get nothing from us. I don't know if that's even allowed by the NFL bylaws, but yeah, it's an interesting story, man, because I remember him coming out of college, you know what I mean? And I really liked him coming out of Notre Dame. I really thought the Pittsburgh Steelers got themselves a little bit of a steal, and things have just not gone well for Chase Claypool. And yeah, man, the comments about the coaching staff, I mean, it didn't work for Justin, and Justin says he wasn't even really trying to throw the coach staff under the bus. So I don't know why he thought it would work for him anyway. But like you said, not going to play in the game, but that certainly still impacts the game because, again, any potential talent that's not on the field certainly is going to impact the game as it gets played. What we're looking at here in Washington, obviously, young quarterback Sam Howell, Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator, those are big storylines, and they're certainly going to play heavily into what happens in this game. But really, the buzz right now, Lauren, is about the defense, and it's about the lack of defense that people are seeing with the Washington Commanders. Right now, the Washington Commanders are bottom 10 in the NFL defensively in rushing and passing yards allowed per play, while sacking the quarterback at a higher rate this year than they were last year. But when you really get down in the weeds of it, they've gotten 6 of their 13 team sacks over the course of 2 games. They got shut out in 1 game completely, and then they got 7 sacks against the Denver Broncos. So just a very up and down season for the defense, for the team in general, but especially for the defense. But the bottom line is, coming into this game, the Washington Commanders defense has given up 30 points or more in each of the last 2 games. Now, one of those was the Buffalo Bills, right? Expected AFC contender, been to the AFC Championship game multiple times in recent years. One of those was the Philadelphia Eagles, just got done losing a Super Bowl. So there's a little bit of a grain of salt to be said there, but but fans, media members, the team itself, they're still frustrated that a defense that they all want to be top 10, top 8, they're eyeing for a top 5 position, is still giving up 30 points in these 2 situations. And for Commanders fans, that's 30 points without the Sam Howell pick sixes and all those things, fumble sixes. That's the Arizona Cardinals game, but without the offensive contributions, that's just the defense. So a lot of people are wondering, is this going to be a get right game for the Washington Commanders defense? And it's interesting, Lauren, because this is a little bit of a flip in the narrative, because over the last few years, we're used to talking about the Washington Commanders being the get right game for other teams. And when I look at the Chicago Bears, if there is a scenario where the Chicago Bears could potentially get right in this game, it would be in the sack department. How has the Chicago Bears pass rush been so far this season? And do you think they can be the latest? It's like the Arizona Cardinals, I think they're like 3rd or 4th in team stats as far as sacks is concerned, but like all but 2 of those sacks or something. And I'm exaggerating, but a lot of those sacks came against the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, you talk about the frustrations with the Commanders defense, and you're not going to find a lot of sympathy from Chicago Bears fans. Like you said, they gave it up 30 points in the last 3 games. The Bears, I think, are at 14 straight games over 25 points allowed, which is an NFL record for the most consecutive games allowing that many points, dating back to last season, obviously, with a defensive head coach. And a big part of that is the lack of pass rush. I mean, I think this season, it's a continuation of last season, despite adding a guy like Yannick Ngakoue during training camp and signing a guy like DeMarcus Walker over from the Tennessee Titans and bringing in Andrew Billings and nose tackle. Like, those guys are improvements talent-wise over what they had last season, but we really haven't seen the production join that level yet. And I think part of that is because it's sort of a symbiotic relationship with the coverage on the back end. And the Bears have had all of their defensive injuries have been concentrated at cornerback and safety. And so as much as like this Bears pass rush isn't very good on its own, it's that much harder to be a good pass rush when you've got 3 backup cornerbacks and at times 2 backup safeties. Like, all 5 players in your nickel package have been backups at points in this season. Eddie Jackson's not going to play on Thursday. I'd be really surprised if he did. Jalen Johnson's not going to play on Thursday. I'd be really surprised if he did. So you're going to have 2 rookie outside cornerbacks, plus your slot is on IR. So you'll have all 3 of your cornerbacks are going to be backup, or are going to be either rookies or backups, plus 1 backup safety. So the pass rush never has a lot of time to get home because the coverage is giving up so easily and so quickly on the back end. So it's just one collective defensive mess. But they would love to get their pass rush going in this game and find some sacks again. They've had a few where they get home but can't finish at the quarterback. So they're kind of close sometimes. And maybe this can be a time where they convert a couple of those. But I don't think that is enough for this Bears defense to all of a sudden fix everything.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And certainly Sam Howell against that pass rush, trying to get started. Sam Howell against that secondary, inexperienced or thin on the top end, is going to be a big part of who comes out winning this game. Interesting stat that I've kind of thrown out on my show and on Commander Country on SI.com. Sam Howell has yet to have 2 straight solid QBR games, or 2 games where he improved his QBR. So starting from his first start against the Dallas Cowboys, he has alternated lower QBR with a higher QBR, going back and forth. So this would be the game that his QBR would drop, but the Chicago Bears have not allowed a QBR under 114 yet this season, which means Sam Howell has a prime opportunity to potentially string together 2 solid QBR days. Hopefully this one coming out in a win after losing the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday. But is that the matchup that we are going to focus on the most when it comes to this Thursday night football matchup? We'll tell you that coming up next on this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this crossover episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and then watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds, although I do take a lot of time sometimes because I'm an overthinker, just like I am in my fantasy rosters. I take 3 players every Thursday night, though. That's my tradition during the season. Most recently, Lauren, I won $158 over the course of last weekend's games worth of football. Easily my best weekend on PrizePicks. I'm hoping to replicate that this weekend. I am taking for Thursday Night Football, Commanders quarterback Sam Howell for more than 250.5 yards of total offense, as passing and rushing. Running back Brian Robinson Jr. for more than 65.5 yards rushing, and Bears quarterback Justin Fields for more than half an interception. But I'm also keeping an eye on PrizePicks weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to you. This week's Taco Tuesday was Marlins pitcher Jesus Luzardo, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not a baseball guy, so I apologize if I'm not. But he was discounted rather to throw less than or more than 4.5 strikeouts against the Phillies. Originally marked at 5.5 strikeouts. The Discord voters, that's the line they wanted. I think they're probably pretty confident that Jesus was going to throw 5.5 against the Phillies that day. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. So go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL on all lowercase for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Thanks again, Locked On Bears and Locked On Commanders listeners, fans, and viewers for making us your first listens, your first views today, every day, and every dayers. We appreciate you coming through and supporting these programs on a consistent basis. Football season is here and in the running, right? And Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Every Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel around. So more than likely, Locked On Bears, Locked On Commanders is where you're going to check that out. They will not be featured on this weekend's live kickoff because their game will be done and they will be resting for at least 11 days. I don't know who the Bears face after that. If they're lucky, they get their bye week and they just get like a month off. But Lauren, Chicago Bears are 0-4. The Washington Commanders are 2-2. I don't know about the Bears folks, but 2-2 was what we would consider par for the Washington Commanders 4 games in. How do you feel about the Chicago Bears 0-4? And what do you think the biggest matchup is for Ohio State legend Justin Fields to get the first win of the season for that franchise?
It's certainly as close to a disaster. I don't know if you can get more disastrous of an 0-4 start right now. It's to the point where, the Chicago Bears have never fired a head coach during a season, like in the middle of a season in franchise history. There's some thought that a loss to the Commanders, having that extra 10 days before they play the Vikings after that, could be a bad enough circumstance and enough time to make that head coaching change. The problem is Matt Eberflus is also the interim defensive coordinator because their defensive coordinator resigned after there were reports of some perhaps law enforcement investigation into, or so now they're saying it's an HR investigation into something he did. That's the kind of disaster we're sitting here at 0-4, and that this team has to sort of, that and the Claypool thing, put that aside and try and win your one-on-one matchups in this game. I mean, I think the big positional matchup here that every Bears fan is most worried about is the Bears offensive line against the Commanders defensive line. Everyone in Chicago is scared of the big front four that they have in Washington. And I was surprised to hear you talk about how I had realized that their sacks have been kind of concentrated in some games, because I have a feeling they're going to have some success in this one. Despite Justin Fields really playing the best game of his career last week against the Denver Broncos, set a franchise record for consecutive completions to start the game, career highs in completions, completion percentage, yards, and touchdowns. It was also against one of the worst defenses in football. So when I go to that O-line, D-line matchup, I'm scared of Bears left tackle Larry Borom, who's the backup left tackle because their starter's on injured reserve, going up against Chase Young, but also the right tackle, the rookie Darnell Wright, going up against Montez Sweat. I think with Darnell Wright as a top 10 pick, he's got a lot of talent, but it's just a lot of up and down right now. Sometimes he looks really good, and sometimes he'll get beat really quickly off the snap, and it's just that learning process for a young right tackle. So it's not like I'm worried about him being a disaster all game, but you're going to have those 1 or 2 plays where Sweat just blows by him and gets to Justin Fields. And then on the other side, Larry Borom is a below average swing tackle going up against Chase Young. It's a great opportunity for Young to get some things going here and start to build on his season in a more favorable matchup on that side. When both of your tackles are a real question, plus some questions on the interior, it does not make for a fine matchup when you see 4 studs line up across from you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's obviously a matchup that the Commanders are going to want to exploit as well and hopefully take advantage of. You speak of Chase Young, and we've had a lot of conversations on Locked On Commanders about what he was doing the last time we saw him healthy, because it really wasn't all that great. Well, now he's already surpassed that sack total from that year, and he got injured 8.5 games into the season. He's only played 3 so far this year. So for him to already be surpassing that sack total, even though it wasn't a great sack total to begin with, but that is the improvement that you wanted to see out of Chase after getting his 5th-year option decline, potentially looking to put the Commanders in a very tough situation, having to pay him and Montez Sweat if they both prove to be successful. But that's exactly what they're both looking to do. Montez Sweat started the season with his hair on fire, especially with Chase Young missing the first week of the year, and has really done well. Even against the Philadelphia Eagles, 3 sacks. I think you want more sacks, but the pressures were there from time to time. And the Washington Commanders defense as a whole is one of the better defenses in the league in getting pressure. The question is, especially against mobile quarterbacks, can you finish? And if you can't finish yourself, can you contain the quarterback to either force a bad throw, a hurry throw, or let your teammate finish? And that's really kind of been the question is, and nobody wants to call these guys greedy, right? But you have 4 first-round picks on the defensive line, and that's great. But all 4 of these guys, they really like their own skill sets and think that they can really finish a play. So sometimes 1 or 2 of these guys do have a tendency at times to get outside their assignment and say, you know what, I'm talented enough. I'm supposed to go outside, but if I bend inside, I bet I can get to this quarterback. If they guess wrong, the edge is open, and that's where quarterbacks do a lot of their damage. And Justin Fields could certainly take advantage of that. I would also look out for Montez Sweat and actually Jamin Davis, their first-round pick linebacker from a few years ago, to actually combine to stress that rookie right tackle out and maybe do some interesting combination things to him to try to see if they can't get one of those guys free, like you mentioned. Washington Commanders fans are going to be looking for Emmanuel Forbes, this year's first-round draft pick. And Lauren, I don't know what your opinion on cornerbacks is and all that stuff. We all talk about quarterback being the toughest position to translate from college to the NFL, and especially if you don't come from a pro-style system in college, then you got to get used to the whole basically different way of operating in the NFL. But I think cornerback, left tackle, obviously, or blindside tackle, obviously the second most important, right? But I think cornerback might be the second hardest position to translate from the college game to the NFL game, especially in your first season. Emmanuel Forbes, the first-round rookie. The Commanders passed on Christian Gonzalez, and I know Christian Gonzalez is battling some injuries right now, but before that, the Patriots were super happy that he fell to them, and that was certainly causing some buzz around Commanders fandom. He got abused, man. He got abused by the Philadelphia Eagles. A.J. Brown did a number on him. Now, the Chicago Bears don't have an A.J. Brown, but if you are the Bears and if you're looking to get an upset win here, you have to look at Emmanuel Forbes and say, look, this dude just got beat up. His confidence may not be where they say it is. We got to go out there. We got to try to get DJ Moore on him. We got to try to get Darnell Mooney on him, and we got to try to exploit that. So do you think that's where the Chicago Bears will try to go? And how do you think that passing game can exploit a rookie that maybe isn't operating at full confidence?
That's where the Chicago Bears should go, but unfortunately, there's been plenty of criticism for offensive coordinator Luke Getsy in terms of not being very good, and it's certainly hard to tell, okay, how much is the play calling versus, the quarterbacking and the offensive line not allowing the ball to get to the receiver, but getting the ball to DJ Moore has been more difficult than it should be this season. And last week, against the Denver Broncos was kind of the first game where it felt like he really was a focal point of the offense. Like, he had 100 yards a couple weeks ago against Tampa Bay, but it was really like 2 big plays, one at the beginning of the game, one at the end of the game, and everything else in between. Like, he wasn't like they were constantly going to him. But last week against Denver, it was like, all right, a couple throws early, and then you get it to him often, let him make plays after the catch. And Justin Fields was also balling and delivering. So it's hard to know, again, like, was that game plan specific really making it easier for Moore, or was that just everything was going well and he was one of the main beneficiaries of that? Like the challenge here is, even when you watch the all 22 of that Broncos game, there was a couple of plays in that game where DJ Moore ran the rub route for Cole Kmet, like not the other way around. You're not using the tight end to free up your number 1 wide receiver. You're using your number 1 wide receiver to free up your mediocre tight end. I mean, Cole Kmet's an okay tight end, but this is not freeing up Robert Gronkowski or Travis Kelce or George Kittle. This is Cole Kmet. So like, it's just stuff like that where you look at the offensive coordinator and it's like, why? Like, it's clearly in the play design, right? This is a route it's a man coverage rub route where it's clearly freeing up this other player, and that's who they threw it to. Like, it's one read there. But why are we not putting your premier weapon in that position to be the guy? So we don't have that faith that, oh yeah, they're going to find the one-on-one matchup against Forbes all game and just absolutely take advantage of that, because they haven't seemed to do that schematically. And then also, we don't trust the offensive line to hold up well enough for Justin Fields to have the time to get the ball to DJ Moore against Forbes in that matchup. And it just becomes kind of a cascading mess.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. So looking over now at most important players in this matchup, and I've kind of danced around it here throughout this episode. I think Sam Howell, the quarterback is the most important position on the field. Sam Howell is that quarterback. He's a young quarterback making his 6th career start. I've actually started wondering, it's almost like having a newborn where it's like they're 9 months old, 8 months old, 14 months old. When do we start talking years? And I'm actually worried, or not worried, but wondering about Sam Howell. When do we stop counting which career start this is? We're not there yet. This is his 6th career start in the National Football League. Again, the Chicago Bears have not given up or forced a QBR worse than 114. I think 114.6 so far this season. So a prime opportunity for Sam. The thing about young quarterbacks, though, that you always have to get a little bit concerned with is if early on that pass rush isn't getting home, pass pro is holding up, secondary is not doing a great job, he's feeling good, he's in rhythm. What can tend to happen is you get a little bit too comfortable. Next thing you know, you're holding the ball in the pocket for 5 seconds. You're not moving around. A strip sack happens. Knock on wood, it doesn't result in a defensive touchdown. And all of a sudden, I call it feeding the gremlins. You're giving the monster that doesn't have to be a monster fuel to become that monster. And that's what I get worried about from a young quarterback. Sam Howell is incredibly intelligent, makes a lot of heady football plays, but even he will admit to you that he's still learning how to make sure that his clock is on time. And I just worry that if early on in this game, the Chicago Bears don't step up on the defensive side of the ball, that at a critical moment, Sam could get a little too comfortable, take a little too long in the pocket, and it could end up disastrous for the Washington Commanders. So that's why I've got Sam as the most important player, outside of the fact that obviously he's the quarterback.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes you get to year 3 with your young quarterback and they're still working on that internal clock in the pocket. So there's a certain patience there that eventually runs out when you stop counting. Okay, what career start is this for Justin Fields? It's like 30 something or other. And it's like, all right, the clock's ticking here. But no, I mean, obviously Fields is going to be the most critical player for the Bears. But to go in a slightly non-quarterback direction here, like the X factor for me coming into this game is Teven Jenkins, the Bears' second round pick from a couple years ago. Went on injured reserve before week 1, or I guess like technically you make the 53-man roster, but has not played yet this season. Designated to return this week, has been practicing in full, although it's kind of walk-through practices at this point, but there's an expectation that he's going to return and make his season debut. He'll plug in at left guard where this will be his first game ever playing at left guard. He played right guard last season, so in theory, there might be an adjustment there, but need to see him play that at a high level. And if he plugs in at left guard, then Cody Whitehair, their current left guard, will move back to center. And he'll replace Lucas Patrick, who's been pretty abysmal for them at the center position. So in theory, you can kind of upgrade 2 positions with 1 return here. Even Cody Whitehair struggled a little bit at left guard this season, even though it's where he played last season, but they'd had him all off season working on center until the Jenkins injury, which again, frustrates the heck out of Bears fans when a guy's playing one spot all year after you moved him and then you just move him back at the first sign of an injury. But regardless, like you maybe can have the most stability on the interior of the offensive line that we've seen all season. Obviously, we talked earlier about the tackles being a concern against Sweat and Chase Young. Still very concerned about Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen in the middle there, but I may be slightly less concerned, or maybe just more hopeful that Jenkins returning plus moving Whitehair back inside and Nate Davis settling in at right guard now can be a more formidable interior to at least keep the front of the pocket clean for Justin Fields if he needs to step up.
Absolutely. So what has to go right for the Chicago Bears to win this game at FedEx Field on Thursday night? What has to go right for the Commanders to get their 3rd win of the season, stay above that 500 mark? We're going to tell you that next on this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's crossover episode brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed whenever you place a $5 bet. Literally, bet $5 on anything you want to on FanDuel, and you will get $200 in bonus bets whether you win or you lose. Currently, the Washington Commanders are 5.5-point favorites to beat the Chicago Bears this Thursday night. So if you think the Bears are going to cover, drop $5 on that. And whether they do it or not, you get $200. You think the Commanders are going to cover? Same thing. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is easy to use. There's a wide-ranging options, or there are wide-ranging options for betting, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And one of my favorite features, you can build your own parlays, and I love doing that. I definitely get myself in trouble sometimes, though, because like I mentioned earlier, I tend to overthink things. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season right. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. Today's Crossover Thursday episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like sometimes you're trying to focus on one thing, but this other thing, whether it be a problem, an experience you recently had, some other life event, some other external stressor, just keeps butting in and won't let you keep your eye on the prize. Therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. It's helpful to learn positive coping skills. It's helpful to teach you how to set boundaries and empowers you to be the best version of yourself. And it's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. Any kind of stress that's getting in the way is stress that you need to deal with. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And if you don't like the first person you get paired with to help you, you can switch. No reason need to be given. No excuses, no letters from anybody. If you want it, you get it. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, we are here wrapping up this crossover Thursday episode, Locked On Bears, Locked On Commanders, talking about this Thursday night football matchup, Amazon Prime exclusive. Lauren NFL Films was in Ashburn, Virginia, doing all kinds of footage on practice and press conferences. I'm sure they got a lot of thrilling footage of the exciting walkthrough that the Commanders executed on Tuesday. So for the Bears to pull this thing off, whether it's cover the spread, whether it's completely win right out, what do they have to absolutely nail on Thursday night against the Commanders?
A lot, and that's the problem, right? I mean, we were on path for watching a victory last week on Sunday against the Broncos, and what went so well for the Bears in that game, a couple of different things, but it feels like mainly Denver sat back coverage wise and were extremely predictable. A lot of man coverage, which is really easy for Fields to read, and a lot of just single deep safety coverage where, you know, pre-snap, if they keep a safety deep, and they never rolled their safeties back much at all, so you can tell pre-snap it's going to be single deep. You send a guy in motion, you know it's man or zone. All right, Fields knows what his coverage is already. Snap, throw, you're good to go. Like, but part of that too is, you know, getting into a rhythm early, building that confidence for Fields. I think you saw him be so much more decisive in the pocket, stand in there and deliver a ball into a tight window with an unblocked player bearing down on his left side. Like, he did that a few different times in that game and made some of the most impressive throws we've seen from him in a number of years. So the Bears need to find a way early to make things easy on him, to get this offense rolling. Feel like there's a lot of confidence that they can build on from at least the first three quarters of last week against Denver. And, you know, certainly that, to me, that's going to come down to the pass rush versus the offensive line. I think the Bears are going to be able to run the ball just fine. They've been able to pretty well do that all season and did it last season with pretty good success there. Teams are spying Justin Fields a bunch. I'm not expecting him to necessarily run all over Washington, but the regular ground game can take some of the pressure off of him. And then, get DJ Moore going against Emmanuel Forbes offensively, build some of that confidence. You can start to catch up that way. Defensively, I don't know. I don't know what you can do with this team. I mean, they blew a 28-7 lead against the Denver Broncos last week. I don't trust them to just hold on against Sam Howell, even though he's a younger quarterback. He's been impressive. And if they can't get a pass rush going against him, and they got a super young secondary with a bunch of injuries to try and cover guys in the back end, there's no magic fix, right? You can't just say blitz more, because, I mean, they tried blitzing more against Russell Wilson and it kind of worked until he figured it out. So blitz less or try and mix up coverages more. Like, there's just no magic fix for this defense. So what it'll take for them to win, you know, a turnover, a batted pass at the line of scrimmage that gets picked off, or a strip sack or something like that. You talked about, you know, Sam Howell maybe trying to do too much or being overconfident in some of those moments. Like, they need Washington to give them something. As long as Washington doesn't beat themselves, they should be fine. But if they have the special teams miscue, you know, the turnover that they just kind of gift the Bears, it's got to be something like that, because I don't trust the Bears on their own to just do it by themselves.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you talked about that, because that's where I'm going to take that and run right into what has to go right for the Washington Commanders, because that is on the offensive side of the ball. Don't feed the gremlins, right? That I used that before. I'll use it again down the road. I'm sure I used it the last time against the Arizona Cardinals in Week 1. That was the last time the Washington Commanders were as heavily favored as they are in this one, and we're going into that matchup. And the thing about the Arizona Cardinals matchup is already raining at FedEx Field, so don't get them wet was not an option for the Washington Commanders. So you're already kind of halfway defeated. But then they had the turnovers, they had the sacks, and they fed the gremlins, and that gremlin almost devoured them in Week 1. Do the same thing against the Chicago Bears, and the Chicago Bears certainly have the personnel to make you pay for all those self-inflicted mistakes. And Sam Howell talked about that in his press conference Tuesday afternoon. He said, look, there are no easy wins in the National Football League. Their record is what their record is, but they still have playmakers over there. They still have a solid defense if they play accurately, and he's got to make the right decisions for his team in order for them to get the win. That's exactly the right mentality for Sam Howell to have, and as long as he doesn't feed the gremlins, they should be able to come out of FedEx with a home win Thursday Night Football, and then you've got a nice long break before you fly to Atlanta to visit old friend Taylor Heineke. On the defensive side of things, Jack Del Rio's already talked about, Ron Rivera's already talked about it, but you know what? They're hitting the nail right on the head, so I'm going to repeat it. Limit the explosives. The reason the Washington Commanders pass or yards per pass, yards per rush averages are so low. The reason they're bottom 10 in the league in those stats right now through 4 weeks isn't because they're just getting run over every down or they're getting passed on every down. It's because of the explosives, especially against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. That Buffalo Bills game really kind of skews a lot of statistical categories for the Washington Commanders, but they're not the only ones that did it. They gave up explosives in every game so far this season. 2 of the 4 games they've played, they've got one play touchdown drives that they've given up in the secondary. You can't do anything, any of those things. You call it the defensive version of don't feed the gremlins. Make Justin Fields, make Khalil Herbert, make all those guys dink and dunk, make them go 10, 11, 12 play drives, and then wait for the opportunity to take advantage of the mistake when it comes. So that's what the Chicago Bears have to do to get a win. That's what the Washington Commanders have to do to get a win. One of these teams is going to get a win. And I think that the one thing we can guarantee, Lori, because we actually can't guarantee that either of them is going to get a win. We've seen that. I think this is going to be a more entertaining game than last year's Thursday night matchup between the Bears and Commanders. I think we can promise that much. Hopefully this episode was entertaining for Bears fans, Commanders fans. That's going to do it for this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bears, Locked On Commanders. Coming up, Lauren and I will have nothing actually, post-game reactions. This is the last episode before kickoff, so make sure you come back to both shows for reactions after whoever wins, whoever loses. In the meantime, make sure you're following Lauren on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can find me at DHarrison82. As always, thank you so much for making us your first listens or views today and every day. Thanks for coming through on both shows on a consistent basis like you do. Thanks for making us part of your day, part of your routine. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind, and we'll both see you next time for the next episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.